Try to remember your 4th birthday. Go ahead. Picture the cake, the room, the faces around you. Most people draw a blank, or maybe a single flickering image with no sound and no story attached to it. You assume this is because you were too young to form real memories yet. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain was recording. It was just throwing almost everything away on purpose. This gap has a name. Scientists call it infantile amnesia, and it is one of the strangest blind spots in the entire human mind. Not because the memories were never made, because something in your brain was actively built to erase them. Sigmund Freud noticed this gap over a century ago. He could not explain why his patients had almost no access to their earliest years, so he guessed it was repression, a kind of psychological hiding. He was wrong about the cause, but he was right that something unusual was happening, and that something has taken modern neuroscience decades to actually map. Here is the first surprising fact. Babies remember things. Even newborns show signs of recognizing a voice they heard in the womb. Toddlers can recall where a toy was hidden weeks earlier. So the problem is not that infants and toddlers cannot form memories. The problem is that almost none of those early memories survive into adulthood. Something happens between early childhood and later childhood that wipes the tape clean. Psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University has spent years studying exactly when this wipe happens. Her research tracked young children's memories over time, asking them to recall specific events from earlier in their lives. What she found was unsettling. Children as young as 3 could describe detailed memories of things that happened to them. But when those same children were asked again years later, the memories were gone. Not faded, gone as if they had never been recorded at all. So when did you actually lose your earliest years? Not gradually. There seems to be a window, and that window slams shut sometime between ages 5 and 7. Why that age range? Why not earlier or later? The leading explanation involves a part of your brain called the hippocampus, the structure responsible for stitching moments into long-term memories. Think of your hippocampus as a kind of internal filing clerk. Sights, sounds, smells, and feelings arrive all at once, and the hippocampus is supposed to bind them together into a single retrievable file you can pull out years later. In early childhood, this filing clerk is still under construction. It is wiring itself, growing new connections, learning how to do its job. The result is that early experiences get logged, but the filing system is too unstable to keep the files intact long-term. This is why your 3-year-old self could have told you, in real time, exactly what happened at the park that morning. The memory existed. It just was not built to last. There is something else going on too, and it has nothing to do with biology. It has to do with language. Psychologist Carol Peterson at Memorial University has run long-term studies tracking how children narrate their own pasts. Her research found a clear pattern. The earliest memories that do survive into adulthood tend to be the ones that were talked about, described out loud, repeated in conversation, especially with a parent. A child who hears their experience turned into a spoken story is far more likely to keep some version of that memory than a child whose experience was never put into words at all. This matters because very young children are still learning language itself. Before a certain point, a toddler simply does not have the vocabulary or narrative structure to convert a raw sensory experience into something that can be filed away as a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And memory, it turns out, loves a story. Without language to scaffold an experience, the brain has almost nothing stable to hold on to. So your earliest years were not unrecorded. They were recorded in a format your adult brain can no longer open. Here is where it gets stranger still. If you do think you remember something from age 2 or 3, there is a real chance that memory is not actually yours. Psychologist Nora Newcomb and other researchers studying early memory have found that a significant number of so-called early memories are reconstructed, not retrieved. A photograph gets shown enough times. A family story gets repeated enough times. And the brain quietly builds a memory around it, complete with a feeling of certainty, even though the original experience was never directly recalled. Why would the human brain do this? Why build something so good at recording in the moment and so bad at preserving it for the long term? Because remembering everything would be a disaster. A toddler does not need to recall the texture of every meal or the layout of every room they crawled through. What a developing brain needs most in those early years is not a perfect archive. It needs flexibility. It needs to be building general knowledge about how the world works, how language works, how people behave, rather than cluttering itself with millions of specific, disconnected scenes. Researchers studying memory development describe this as a trade-off between forming semantic knowledge, the general rules of the world, and forming episodic memory, specific personal events. Early childhood appears to prioritize the first at the expense of the second. In other words, your earliest years were not wasted. They were spent building the operating system your memory would eventually run on. The cost of building that operating system was losing almost all the files created while it was still being installed. This is not just a quirk of human development. It echoes something seen across the animal kingdom. Young animals across many species show a similar pattern: rapid, early learning paired with poor long-term retention of specific early experiences, while the general knowledge gained, how to move, how to recognize danger, how to interact with others, sticks around for life. Your childhood amnesia is not a flaw unique to humans. It may be the price almost every developing brain pays for learning quickly. So what does this mean for you now, today, as an adult who occasionally feels a strange tug from somewhere before memory begins? It means that the absence of those early memories is not evidence that nothing happened. Your first steps, your first words, the first time someone held you and you felt safe, all of it happened, and all of it shaped the brain you are using right now to read these words. The architecture is still there even though the photographs are gone. It also means that every time you watch a young child today, a niece, a nephew, your own son or daughter, you are watching someone build memories that will almost entirely vanish within a few years. And the way to help even a fraction of those memories survive is exactly what Carol Peterson's research points toward. Talk about it. Turn the moment into a story out loud, together while it is happening. Not for a performance, not for a photo. For the simple act of giving a fragile memory the one thing it needs to survive the demolition that is coming. Because the truth about your earliest years is not that they were empty. It is that they were busy building the very mind now trying and failing to remember them.